What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you the initial details for Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced, which is a bit of a mouthful of a title, and just so happens to be the remake, of course, of Black Flag that was, I think, properly announced and shown off yesterday, as previously it was just rumors that had been swirling. Now, I'll be upfront with everybody watching this video. I am not like a big Assassin's Creed aficionado, and if you are looking for like direct comparisons and things like that, you're probably better off checking out channels that are dedicated to that kind of thing. The reason I am personally covering this game is, if you remember, a couple of months ago towards the beginning of the year, I expressed a desire to cover more of the Assassin's Creed series, and the reason for that is that I had played 1 and 2, never touched the series again after that until Assassin's Creed Shadows, which honestly just wasn't really for me, and I knew at that point I wanted to play more of them. I've actually played Mirage since then. But in expressing all of that, I basically asked people, kind of what games would be the best ones to play in the series, and the general answers I got were mainly Black Flag, Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla. Now, even at that time, there were a bunch of rumors about this remake of Black Flag happening, and so it made sense, I thought, to wait for that to release or, get some proper news, that kind of thing, before I jumped into the others. Obviously, here we are, that's why I'm covering this, and of course, I'm going to review it when it properly releases, because the biggest news we probably got, I would say, is that this is actually releasing on July 9th. So this will be a summer release, and it seems like a fun game to play over the summer, to be honest. Coming in about 13 years after the original, I believe. With that said, let's go ahead and get into the basics of this. So if you are like myself and have not played this previously but had picked up some things over the years, you'll probably find some of the basics here useful, but they also gave a lot of information about what is changing and everything in the initial deep dive. For starters, a full-blown remake in the latest version of their Anvil engine. With it being a full remake, they have actually added a few things like the new officers, as well as different ways to tackle like the eavesdropping and tailing missions that people apparently didn't like much from the original title. Now, what has obviously not changed is we still play one Edward Kenway, who gets embroiled in the ongoing fights between the Assassins and the Templar, which sees him properly taking up the life of a pirate and captaining the ship, the Jackdaw. Now, I always thought this game was especially interesting because the main thing people seemed to enjoy about it previously, or at least the original iteration, was not so much the assassin part as it was like a really good pirate game in particular. People talked a lot about things like the ship combat and the exploration, and they went on to, of course, address a lot of those things, but I did want to point out that another thing they seemed to really hone in on, it seems like they wanted to expand upon the assassin part as well, by making changes such as, apparently you'll be able to actually use stealth wherever, which I guess wasn't an option in the original. That was certainly interesting to hear, but now the stealth approach is always available to you. And of course, they brought in the more modern approach to things like parkour, etc. that have evolved since this game had initially released. On top of little changes like that, they also mentioned that the world is going to be a little more seamless now. There's not going to be a lot of the loading screens that there were previously. It also seemed like they mentioned that they expanded the underwater exploration, or at least that seems to be what they implied, but it'll obviously be new to me either way. Now, in addition to that, I mentioned that they changed up the eavesdropping. In particular, my understanding is that when you would get caught with these originally, you would just auto-fail the mission and have to redo it. That is no longer the case. If you fail it now, the mission continues, but it plays out a little bit differently, giving you different options to approach those quests. So, you can still fail by like dying and whatnot. However, they've introduced, again, different ways to play those particular missions, and I think that is going to be of interest to a few people. But perhaps when, not if, you inevitably fail some of those missions, you're going to find yourself at the mercy of the game's action combat system. Now, they did want to explicitly stress multiple times that this is not an RPG, which is important because, there are, I would basically say, two types of Assassin's Creed game that I have seen, which is more of the action stealth side of things, and then the RPG route that they went with a few of the other later titles. The original Black Flag was more of the former, and so it would have been very odd if they made it an RPG, and instead, it is in fact going to be an action combat system focusing on things like combos, parries, takedowns, skills, incorporating stealth, of course, and, the things you would probably be used to from that genre more generally. I did just want to emphasize the approach that they were going for here, and combining that with things like the ship combat and, of course, the traversal, it seems interesting enough for what it is. But speaking of the ship combat, you still take control of the Jackdaw, your ship, and you will be, of course, entertaining some ship-to-ship combat. What is changed here is that they've loaded up the ship with more firepower. This seems to both imply literally more firepower in the forms of more guns and things, but those weapons you have access to will now also have alternative fire modes they mentioned as well, so it should be more deadly. And then if that wasn't enough, you also get those new officers that I talked about. There are apparently going to be 3 new officers, each of which has their own little quest line, and will give you more combat perks, I guess you could call them, for your ship-to-ship combat, making you even more effective there. To make those things a little more exciting on top of all of that, you'll also be able to recruit like hats and monkeys and stuff to be a sort of crew mascot, I guess you could call it, on top of things like adding dynamic weather systems and whatnot to make it more interesting to explore on top of everything else. So that's kind of like the core stuff in terms of what's changing and everything. Now, opinion-wise, as somebody who has never played Black Flag, this honestly looks pretty good to me. This is at least seemingly addressing some of the problems people had with the original, which should make it a smoother experience for people like myself, hopefully. I also enjoy the look of it. I also enjoy the setting and the sailing around and everything. I've heard the ship-to-ship combat's really good. I'm curious to see people's ultimate opinions on that when the game actually releases. Obviously, I'll have my own about what this game is, but people will obviously make comparisons and have preferences, I'm sure. But I have to admit, I'm kind of glad I waited to play this one, because I was probably going to play Black Flag next one way or another. But hearing that they changed things, like apparently not being able to use stealth all the time in the original version, probably would have been slightly annoying to me, and that actually does make it initially make more sense as to why people said it was a better pirate game than an Assassin's game. That sounds like it kind of put the pieces of that little puzzle together for me, I guess you could say. But more than anything, while I will obviously not be able to give as in-depth a comparison as the diehards are going to be able to, I'm sure, the nice thing about waiting for remakes as a place to experience a game for the first time is that, as a reviewer at least, I can be like, here's how this looks as somebody experiencing this fresh, even if I can't necessarily make that apples to oranges comparison. So in that sense, I'm looking forward to playing this and reviewing it. I've got to say, honestly, this strikes me as just like a really fun game to play over the summer more than anything. So hopefully it delivers. But with all of that said, I would love to know what you guys think of it down in the comment section below. Which of course means to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.